Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to The Discriminating Gamer, the Tito Jackson of Board Game Review Show. Tito? Really? Tito? Ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to go ahead and take a look at all things zombie. Reloaded from Lock and Load Publishing.
My zombie girl claws her way up through the soil. She wants me bad, but I know that she'll stay loyal. She wants a kiss, leans in like this, then bites off my lower lip. She's in my heart, but wants in my head. I'm in love with the living dead. She's one of the dead. She's one of the dead. She's one of the dead. I'm in love with the dead.
In All Things Zombie Reloaded from Lock and Load Publishing, 1 to 6 players, or potentially more, are of course survivors in this zombie apocalypse world. Now, what's going to happen is each player is going to have a star. This is kind of a major character. They're going to have room to carry stuff in a pack, and they're also going to be able to, of course, carry stuff in their hands. These are oftentimes weapons, or supplies, or food, just other things generally you need in order to survive during a zombie apocalypse. Now, you're also going to have the possibility of recruiting grunts. Now, these could be, there's different classes. There's, gangers, there's militia, there's survivors, and you are going to kind of assign yourself a class, and you may hook up with some of these people, and they may be angry at you and start shooting at you, or they may be friendly. But, of course, there's that ever-present threat of zombies. Now, this game works as a campaign game or as a standalone with kind of scenarios. I have not played the campaign game. I've simply played a few of the scenarios, so I'll tell you my thoughts on them. Now, essentially, how it works is you can start the game with these kind of scenario baselines, but they're kind of open. You don't have to stick strictly to the written objectives and stuff. You can mix stuff around. You can kind of invent your own. There's some leeway here, which is pretty cool in the game. But essentially, it starts out that you have different areas. You have urban areas, more rural areas with different buildings and different size buildings, and they have the buildings have different triangles, which indicate kind of how hard or easy it may be to get into those buildings. At the very beginning of the game, your characters come on the board, and you are going to start spawning zombies. You each draw a card. We'll tell you where or rather how many zombies spawn, and then you kind of place them within, I think, 6 hexes of your character. Then what's going to happen is you're going to go ahead and move. You can shoot. Now, if you shoot, that's going to call zombies around. You got to draw cards for zombies to see if they're attracted to the gunfire. And then you can move. You may be able to perform some other actions. Now, for instance, if you go into a building, every time you go into a building, as I say, depending on what the color triangle is, you may have to roll a die to see if you kind of can break the locks, as it were, to get inside. If you go into a building, you have to draw a card. Again, you may spawn more zombies in that building. You may also spawn, as I say, some of these other classes, these survivors, these gangers, these militia. And there's a cool mechanic here where if you find these kind of human classes, you can go ahead and essentially roll a number of dice for talk the talk. Each player has different stats, a reputation stat, a movement stat. And with your reputation, you can essentially roll a number of dice. Now, you score successes generally on a 1 to 3, but you're rolling a different number of dice, and then you have another player roll for the zombies or roll for the other classes, and then you have to kind of beat their number. And depending on how you beat their number, you look at a table, and it tells you what happens. So talk the talk, you're essentially negotiating with these people. They may join you. You can kind of put their characters with you that then you can use and play with. Or they may give you some items, or you can maybe trade items with them, and that's a pretty cool mechanic. And then the zombies have their movement, where essentially you determine the directions, you roll a 6-sided die, and then depending on the number, they move along the hex a certain number of spaces. If there's no one they can see. If another survivor or another player is in line of sight, they're going to, of course, move right toward them, and they're going to have to attack them and fight them. Now, certain things may trigger in combat, too. You roll the dice, and some things may happen. If it's melee combat, there may be involuntary movement. You may be forced to move in certain directions. That's interesting as well. So once you've fulfilled your victory conditions, whatever they are for that particular scenario or what you've set up, then whoever wins the game. You can play this, however, as a cooperative mode where you're working together, or competitive to see whoever can get that objective first. Now that is just a brief, bare bones overview of All Things Zombie Reloaded. There is a lot more. The rulebook's like 40 pages. This is a very intense game. Very thick, rulesy game. I mean that as a good thing, and I mean that as a bad thing, because there are some really cool mechanics here. As I say, there are a lot of tables in this game. For combat, you're constantly consulting the tables to see exactly what happens. You're consulting the tables, to, as I say, when you're talking to some of these other NPCs. So there's some really interesting mechanics on that level. And the whole game feels very much like almost a role-playing game in certain aspects. At the same time, too, it almost feels like a war game in certain aspects. Now, Lock and Load Publishing primarily does war games, and that really comes through in this game. It really feels like a Hex Encounter war game in a lot of ways. But it's not. I want to stress that. It's not a war game, but it kind of does have that feel to it. But it also does have that kind of role-playing game feel to it as well. I really like some of the mechanics, like I said, when you're talking to people, you're negotiating with them, because it creates a narrative, it creates a story. It's one of the reasons why I say it's very role-playing-like, is you have that very kind of interesting and solid story. There's also player elimination, and it can be very easy to get eliminated very quickly, just through some bad die rolls. So that can be a little frustrating, especially if you're playing with a lot of people and the game continues on for a while, even after you've been eliminated. That's a little frustrating. I'm not somebody that despises player elimination. I think in a lot of games it works. Here, it can be brutal. It can be unforgiving. All things told, All Things Zombie is interesting. It's a fun game. It's got a lot of good things going for it. But, again, we're at that point where there's so many good zombie games out there that I don't know if this is one that's going to appeal to everybody. I think, my zombie game of choice is probably Zombicide. I like that. I like the minis, but I just like the basic tension, and it gets so bigger and bigger and ratchets it up the tension as it goes along. Dead of Winter I don't really consider a zombie game, though there are zombies in it. So All Things Zombie feels a lot like one of these standard zombie games just from the surface of it, but when you get into a lot of the rules here, it's a very different game, and it's a very unique game in a lot of ways. I like All Things Zombie Reloaded. I played the original All Things Zombie several years ago. I enjoyed it as well. They did improve some of the mechanics, make things a little bit more streamlined with the All Things Zombie Reloaded, and a few other cool little bells and whistles. But all told, this is not a game I'm going to reach for off my shelf, I think, a lot. Because, like I said, there are other games that I think do it better. Having said that, I think there are people out there that prefer more of an RPG game and that strong narrative story that this is going to put out there. And as I say, this game will really appeal to war gamers. So my recommendation is to try it before you buy it. I'm going to go ahead and say, like, if you fall into one of those camps, an RPG person or a war gamer, you're really going to want to pay attention to this one. So it's a try it before you buy it. It's a positive try it before you buy it. Thank you once again for joining us today on The Discriminating Gamer. As always, we ask you to please leave a comment for us on YouTube, on Board Game Geek, on our Facebook page, or on thediscriminatinggamer.com. We ask you to please like us on Facebook and subscribe to us on YouTube. We are The Discriminating Gamer. And, come on, LaToya, maybe? Maybe LaToya? Oh, what about Jermaine? Let's be Jermaine, huh?
My zombie girl doesn't need me to buy her stupid flowers. She's into raw meat. Every ounce I bring her, she devours. I took her home to see.
Your beard is only moderately better than mine.